Hi, everyone, and welcome to Channeling Hallmark, the podcast where we talk about all the things that make us feel warm and fuzzy like we do when we watch sappy rom-coms. I'm your host, Dylan Cashbaugh.
And I'm also your host, Keetin Markey. Happy New Year, everyone. This is our first episode that we're recording in the new year in 2025. And I don't really believe in resolutions because I feel like they're too stressful, but I do love the idea of kind of like a mantra or like a way of thinking going into a new year. So I know we're saying that 2025 is our year of channeling Hallmark in our everyday lives, and we hope we help you do that once a week at least. So warm and cozy all year long.
We have another amazing episode for you guys. A little bit of context. December is the most popular month to get engaged because of the holidays and everything. So we're going to keep this month kind of a little bit focused on weddings and wedding-related information and maybe help out any newly engaged couples out there.
Yeah, but not only helping newly engaged couples, but also having really cool conversations with people who work in this industry that can be a little wild, but can also be really inspiring and all about love.
On this episode, we're going to be reviewing the 2008 movie Maid of Honor, and we'll also be talking to two photographers who specialize in elopement photography and who actually helped us in the lead up to our wedding. And we think they are wonderful people, and I hope you guys really enjoy our conversation with them.
Yeah.
Keetin, what are you drinking?
You guys were drinking tea again because tea, you know, if you can't do hot cocoa, you do tea. And today we're doing the Republic of Tea. It's actually a special tea from the Calm app called Focus. And this is green tea with peppermint, lion's mane, and lemon. And I love because the top says sip by sip rather than gulp by gulp. So I'm going to give you a little ASMR sip right now of the Focus Calm tea. It's good. It's very light drinking. And as somebody who has ADHD, anything that helps me focus is great, but it also tastes delicious.
Yeah, it is. I feel like a very nice level of peppermint because it's easy for a mint tea to, wait, is it peppermint or spearmint?
It is peppermint, lion's mane, and lemon.
Yeah, I feel like peppermint can be an overwhelming flavor, but this is a really nice subtle amount that makes it a very soothing tea.
Yeah, highly, highly recommend. And also, I just know the Republic of Tea has such a great assortment of teas. So if you ever see it laying around, dive into the Focus Calm Tea from Republic of Tea. You want to talk about some hot cocoa?
Yeah, though we have this tea in our hands, we're not going to spill it. We're not here to spill tea. We're here to sip hot cocoa.
Yes.
Hot cocoa is something that we encountered this week that made us feel warm and fuzzy. So, Keetin, what's your hot cocoa for the week?
Well, we traveled back on New Year's Eve to California from my parents' house, and I've been so into my books. I'm reading the Throne of Glass series right now by Sarah J. Maas. Ladies out there, or gentlemen who feel me with those amazing fairy fantasy smut books, I'm in. They bring me lots of joy, but that's not actually my hot cocoa because something tore me away from the book during the 5-hour flight. And that was seeing that the Prince of Egypt stage musical was actually available on the Delta flight to watch. And let me tell you, the 1998 film, The Prince of Egypt, which is basically about, it was a DreamWorks animation film about the biblical story of Moses. The music is composed by, from Wicked fame, Stephen Schwartz. So you know it's going to be good. Mariah Carey and Whitney Houston did the original kind of big number song, When You Believe, from this. But the score and like the soundtrack itself from like when I was a kid in 1998, I was obsessed with it. I sang one of these songs in the talent show one year. I love Prince of Egypt. I watch it every year, the cartoon version, and I did not know it had a stage musical. So then I got to watch the stage musical, which was beautifully done. The choreography was incredible. Like I'm literally sitting there watching this like film stage musical, holding back tears because it is like it's a very intense story. The music is so beautiful, but to see these performers act it out and to see it in a whole new way, it brought me lots of warm and fuzzies. It made me feel, it really passed the time on the flight. And I absolutely recommend watching it if you are a fan of the original. So that's my hot cocoa.
Good. I'm glad you have a new comfort movie.
What's your hot cocoa, Dylan?
In case it's not obvious from listening already, we are both kind of nerdy people. So my hot cocoa is a New Year's related thing, and that is I spent my New Year's Eve at a bar called the Roguelike Tavern because the Roguelike Tavern was hosting Lord of the Rings night for New Year's Eve, where there was Lord of the Rings trivia followed by watching the extended edition of Fellowship of the Ring. And it was an amazing time. I'll take just a moment to kind of brag about the fact that, yes, my team did win trivia. So we might have been the nerdiest Lord of the Rings people in the bar. But my hot cocoa moment is actually early on in the night before the trivia started. I was sitting at the bar with two of my best friends drinking pints where everybody in the bar is dressed up like hobbits or wearing Lord of the Rings related sweaters or dressed up like Aragorn. Everyone was fully committed while we were listening to the Lord of the Rings soundtrack playing in the bar. So it just felt like such a cozy moment for me because it kind of felt like I was at the Prancing Pony or like at the Green Dragon. I loved it. And that moment for me was the perfect cozy end to 2024 to set up 2025 as the year of channeling Hallmark.
I love it. If you guys have learned anything about us by now, it's that we are both very nerdy. So between Lord of the Rings, Prince of Egypt musicals, ACOTAR, and the Sarah J. Maas series, and you'll find a lot of our other quirks as we continue this podcast, but we hope they make you feel warm and fuzzy. So we shared our hot cocoa with you, but we'd love to hear what your hot cocoa is. So leave us comments on either our Instagram or in the comment section for our podcast. We'd love to know the things that are bringing you joy, and shout out some of your favorite places like the Roguelike Tavern, and let us know if there's any places we need to hit up so we can also get that hot cocoa feeling that you had.
Yeah, if anyone else knows about any Lord of the Rings events at bars, please let me know. Though just be warned, if it's trivia, I might do well.
Let's talk about Maid of Honor, shall we?
Let's do it.
When his best friend Hannah goes to Scotland for 6 weeks, Tom realizes that he's in love with her and decides to tell Hannah upon her return. But when she comes back, she's engaged to Scottish hunk Colin and asks him to be her maid of honor in their wedding. Tom agrees, but secretly plans to use his position to win Hannah's love. Shenanigans obviously ensue. Directed by Paul Wayland and starring Patrick Dempsey and Michelle Monaghan, this 2008 film has Hannah meeting Colin and marrying him, or at least planning to, in the span of less than 2 months. Keetin, to contrast that, you and I were engaged for 2 years after we had already known each other for roughly 10 years. So do you think that 2 months from meeting to marriage is unreasonably fast? Or, if I were a hunky Scottish duke who owned a whiskey distillery, would we have had a much faster timeline?
It's so funny because as soon as you started asking me that question, I was already in my head getting ready to be like, of course that's too fast. Of course that's too fast. But then you reminded me that he was a hunky Scottish duke who had multiple castles, it seemed, and they owned a whiskey distillery. And you know what? I could probably get swept off my feet in about 2 weeks, to be quite frank.
Wow. Well, I guess I know where I stand.
What did you think of it? This was your first time seeing it. I remember seeing this in theaters because this came out in prime Patrick Dempsey time when he was Grey's Anatomy was really hot. I remember it was when I was in college. It was 2008. And people were really excited about this. But what was kind of your take on going back in time a little bit and seeing this love story from 2008 play out?
Yeah, I mean, first off, it is a fun movie. I enjoyed it. Overall, had a lot of fun. There are definitely some parts of it that were a little dated, some jokes that don't necessarily hold up as well to me. But I think overall it was a fun, in the intro to this, when I said shenanigans ensue, that was my favorite part, is the shenanigans. There were so many good shenanigans in this that were just silly and enjoyable to be a fly on the wall for. So I'm really happy that it did feel like a silly movie. And like you said, it felt very Hallmarky in that we go to this Scottish castle for the wedding, of course, because why would you not just go to a castle for a wedding? I mean, I think that's how most weddings occur, right? That's how ours was. So
Ours was
that's pretty
an
standard.
Irish castle. But
Well,
yeah.
it was still a castle at least.
I think one of the things that like and I think I said this while we were watching it, just because it opened with them in college, and you and I met in college, and we dated very briefly in college, and then we broke up, and we very much became friends years later, and we were friends for a while, and navigating that friendship. And then kind of starting to have feelings for each other. So there was a lot of this kind of that reminded me of our dynamic a little bit. I don't know if you were as much of a man whore as Patrick Dempsey seemed to be. I don't know if you ever had rules.
No, that was unfamiliar ground for me.
And I didn't, run away to Scotland, and then you kind of sabotaged my marriage to a duke. But yeah, this made me feel very warm and fuzzy because I just saw a lot of their kind of like friendship chemistry that led to love in our relationship.
I would agree with that. It did feel very familiar in a lot of ways that I really enjoyed. I think I was obviously going to be biased to enjoy this movie because so much of it does take place in Scotland, on the Isle of Skye, around the Isle of Skye, and then in Glencoe. There were so many places that we have been to that we have a lot of love for. So just seeing those places on screen at all, yeah, I'm going to like the movie kind of no matter what to a certain extent.
Well, first of all, we've been to that castle that is playing his family home. What castle?
Eileen Donan
Castle. We've been to that multiple times because every time you leave Skye, you go by it. Or at least the route we would take. And I'd always be like, well, if there's a castle I can see, we better freaking stop. That's kind of my rule when we're driving around Scotland or Ireland. So that was wild to know that we had walked in their footsteps, as well as seeing Portree, which is kind of the main city in Skye. And there was a shot of them walking into like a pub with like the sign of like an inn on top. And we literally stayed at an Airbnb that was on the second floor of that. So I was just like, did we walk in that same door too? Like it was just wild. And I completely forgot about any of that. Because again, I saw this in theaters probably with a couple of my sorority sisters back in 2008 and haven't really thought about it since.
Yeah, and I guess I do think there were definitely some jokes that don't hold up. Like, oh, he's the maid of honor. Oh, he must be gay. Things like that. But I also do think there were some things that I enjoyed about it in that at first it was, oh, it's so funny that you'd ask a man to be the maid of honor, etc. But then he did kind of embrace that role. And I really appreciated seeing a man on screen and his getting his buddies together to like kind of do wedding prep stuff in a way that honestly you don't see too much presented. But I have been engaged and did a lot of wedding prep with you, and I really enjoyed a lot of it.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's nice to have men on screen be able to do fun wedding things and make that okay.
Even though it was technically to sabotage her actual wedding.
We don't need to get into that, you know?
No, I really, this again brought back a lot of memories leading up to our wedding. And also I've been a bridesmaid 7 times, and the bridesmaid dynamic that they kind of showed of like, there's always somebody that's a little kind of ticked off that they're not the maid of honor. And, there's always a weird dynamic. So like within kind of the bridesmaids. So the moment you bring a hot straight man into that has slept with one of the bridesmaids, I can't even imagine. But Busy Phillips was great. We also had Whitney Cummings as one of the bridesmaids. And both of those women are still huge today. And it was fun to kind of see them earlier on in their careers and these kind of more side roles, but still totally own it and like be so funny and just like add like a great kind of foil to Patrick Dempsey's kind of, oh, I got it all together, suave guyness.
Yeah, it felt like seeing the dynamic of these 3 bridesmaids. You could see watching this movie and then be like, oh, I wish there was a movie that's just about bridesmaids. And then the movie Bridesmaids happened. So maybe this was inspiration for that.
Can we talk about, actually, because I know I'd already mentioned that these were Patrick Dempsey's in Grey's Anatomy, but Kevin McKidd, who played the hunk Colin, the Scottish hunk Colin, they are actually both Grey's Anatomy alums. Obviously, Patrick Dempsey, Derek Shepherd, a.k.a. Mick Dreamy. Kevin McKidd plays Dr. Owen Hunt. And his nickname is G.I. Joe. I think I fell off of kind of it's weird. He didn't get a Mick name, even though he's Scottish, which is kind of a missed opportunity.
That feels really
like, where's
missed
Mick Scotsman? Mick, I don't know. But he's G.I. Joe. It's just both of those guys have had such a long-standing career since this movie, and they're both still dreamy as hell. I was looking up current pictures of them. I mean, Patrick Dempsey was named the sexiest man alive just in 2023.
Really? That recently?
That recently. He was the sexiest man alive.
Wait, he also had to have gotten that in the early 2000s.
I don't know.
Right?
You should look it up.
I should look that up.
Because there's a computer right there. But there's something about both the men that our ingenue had a choice of that they have both aged like fine wine. She didn't have a bad choice there, really. Literally, she has two wealthy men, one a wealthy New Yorker who's an inventor, who also comes obviously from a very rich family, considering his dad's multiple wives and whatever, and then a Scottish duke. What does she have? What are her pheromones that, like, these are the two men that are, like, being drawn into this chick? I don't know. She's super cute, don't get me wrong, and very charming, but damn. Do you have an answer for us?
I have an answer for you.
Please tell me.
So apparently, this is the first time that he has been, like, the cover of the Sexiest Man Alive issue.
Okay.
He has been featured as a Sexiest Man Alive previously in 2006 and 2007, but he was not the cover star. So
Wow.
2023 was his first time as that. But also that shows that, like, 2006 and 2007 was essentially peak McDreamy.
Yeah.
And then this is 2008. So this is right in that peak McDreamy time.
Yeah. And as much as we loved, I know, the Scotland part of this movie also was a love letter to New York in a way. I loved seeing them wandering around New York. I loved seeing this young New York couple from the early 2000s and, you know, the flip phones. It felt like a little time capsule, just similar to how, like, When Harry Met Sally feels like a little time capsule to me of, like, that era of New York. This kind of felt like a early 2000s time capsule era of New York.
That's true. Sorry, the location is reminding me of one thing that I did have to note.
Yes.
There were some inaccuracies in this movie, particularly apparently the people involved did not know how time zones work. New York is typically 5-hour time zone difference from Scotland, and he called her while it was daylight out, and she said it's 3 a.m. I don't think it's daylight in New York at 10 p.m. normally. So I did have that issue.
Fact checker over here,
Yep.
Dylan Cashball, really keeping him honest.
The other thing that I think is very noteworthy about this movie, though, is they knew the way to my heart in that every time Patrick Dempsey's character sees a dog, he has to make sure that he pets it. And he almost immediately says, I love you to the dog, which is exactly how I react to
Yes.
dogs. But then at the end of the movie, when he's, about to give up, what happens? He sees a dog. And it's in petting that dog that he decides to go back and try and win her one last time. That dog saved the movie. That dog is the hero of this movie. And I think it's good that we're getting more leading roles for dogs in Hollywood, even though this was 2008.
Well, that was like another thing too that I was like, oh wow, this Patrick Dempsey character is a version of my husband. Another thing that I thought was really funny and kind of just made this movie feel a little bit like a time capsule to me was the Elizabeth Hasselbeck cameo. Elizabeth Hasselbeck was a contestant on season 2 of Survivor, but she was also obviously a very prominent host on The View. And I believe also on, like, Fox, I think. But it was kind of wild to see her, probably at her height too, having this cameo in a movie teaching someone how to be the best maid of honor. And you know what? I wish that video actually existed because some people do need that help. Being a maid of honor is not easy. There's a lot of things that if you haven't done it before, if you have not been just a bridesmaid, you wouldn't really know unless somebody gave you a manual or kind of really helped you through it.
Yeah, and having been the groom, at least for me, in a decently complex wedding with destination stuff, it is helpful to have people around you that really know what they're doing.
But here's my question. Do we feel bad for Colin at the end? Like Colin didn't do anything wrong.
Absolutely feel like, I'm going to be honest, if I had been in Michelle Monaghan's shoes, I totally would have gone for Colin. Sure, he hunts and she didn't like that, but that was kind of the one thing.
He also played the bagpipes and
I like
practiced them every
bagpipes.
day.
I
Ugh.
am happy to listen to bagpipes. So I do not mind that. As usual, though, we do have to give it a marshmallow rating.
Oh, we do.
Yeah. So, and I guess just a little context that I want to share. A marshmallow rating is not the same thing as a star rating.
No.
If you are someone who follows me on Letterboxd, you will notice that my star ratings do not correspond to marshmallows. Star rating is the movie quality and how it worked for me. Marshmallows is kind of a warm and fuzzy factor.
No, it's, you know what? Marshmallow is squishy and sweet. It's its squishy and sweet rating. So I got you on
You
that
got
one.
me on that. Yep, I really enjoy that.
How squishy and sweet is this movie for you? How many marshmallows is it, Dylan?
I mean, like I said, I am biased because of the presence of Scotland.
But you feel bad for Colin. I
feel
know
bad.
you
That's the
do.
thing
Your
is
heart's breaking for the
exactly,
Scotsman,
like,
but the dog saved the day.
Dog. Oh, I'm so
Wow,
torn
what
here.
are you gonna
'Cause
rate it?
This had a lot of highs for me, but a lot of lows. So
Was it
I'm
too
a
much
little
New
torn.
York? Were they in New York for
I don't
too
mind
long?
New York. It was frankly it was the dated jokes that took some warm and fuzzy away for me. But then the Scotland and the dog brought it back. Where I think I'm gonna give it 7 marshmallows again.
7 marshmallows.
Yeah, 7 marshmallows.
Okay, I'm gonna give it 8 marshmallows.
Wow.
This movie, like I liked it so much, and I know I picked this movie just so everybody knows, and we kind of went back and forth, being like, are we going to allow theatrical releases to be under the Channeling Hallmark umbrella? We had this discussion, and there are just so many wonderful rom-coms that I think we would have fun diving into. We could potentially find some really wonderful guests that relate to them, and we can kind of like live in this nostalgia together. And nostalgia in itself, I think, is a Channeling Hallmark trope a little bit. So I think, we're going to do some more maybe older theatrical released rom-coms if we see fit. We are going to dive into more actual Hallmark movies. We're going to, step into Lifetime, Netflix, just anything that really kind of falls under that beautiful Channeling Hallmark umbrella. That's fair game. Fair game, in my opinion.
And that being said, if there are movies you want us to talk about, you want us to review, please let us know.
If you want to watch Maid of Honor and see what you think of it, you can watch it on any VOD platforms like Amazon Prime, Apple, or on YouTube. And if you do watch it, please let us know what you think.
When we come back, we have some exciting guests to interview that not only are going to give us some great insight on living in Scotland, but also on getting married in Scotland. We actually worked with them leading up to our wedding, and we are so excited to talk with them more and introduce them to all of you. So stay tuned.
We are joined by Oli and Steph, who after starting their careers out working in conservation and as a chef, now live on the Isle of Skye in Scotland, where they specialize in helping couples with their elopements and taking amazing photos of it. We first met you both when you took our photos shortly after we got engaged, and standing on top of a mountain in big puffy coats at dawn, taking a sip of whiskey to keep ourselves warm, is one of my personal favorite memories of us as a couple. And a big reason for that is because you helped us to feel comfortable and you made the experience a celebration of our love instead of just trying to take cool photos. But the photos were still pretty darn cool. I can't really think of a more warm and cozy life than living on what might be the most beautiful island in the world and taking photos of couples celebrating their love. So to start things out, what drew you two to creating this kind of life for yourselves?
Thanks, Dylan, for that really amazing introduction. And that is so nice. That's one of your favorite memories together. And it was, 3 years ago now? Over 3 years since you were here on Skye with us. And we still remember that day because I remember that we had to push you a day later because of the weather, and it just worked out so nicely. And you know what? Oli's here with his whiskey again, so we're going around full circle. But
we're both doing warm and cozy drinks for different times of the day. Then it's early enough here that we have tea. You have whiskey because it's the appropriate time for that. I love that.
I have tea as well.
Yeah, I'm on the Lagavulin 16.
Yeah.
I don't drink whiskey all the time, guys. I sound like a massive whiskey drinker now, but
You're in Scotland. It's expected.
It's the depths of winter now, so yeah, it's quite appropriate.
But to answer your question, what drew us to come to Skye in the first place? I think for both of us, we really love mountainous environments. We love the ocean, and before we were on Skye, we were living down in England, very inland in a very flat area, and it was good for work at that time in our lives, and it was near family, but really we just wanted to get to the mountains and be able to live a more outdoor lifestyle, because when we first met, we actually met working on a small subantarctic island called South Georgia, which is literally the middle of nowhere. It's 1,000 miles away from anywhere else, and it's just full of mountains, glaciers, penguins, and that's where we found each other. So we just wanted to get back into that lifestyle, basically.
Both of you have such unique backgrounds that have eventually now led you into this business together. But tell us a little bit about each of your backgrounds and what led you now to engagement elopement photography.
Yeah, of course. So I was working as a chef when we met. I'd got a bit sick of the restaurant scene in the UK, and I managed to find a chef job on a conservation project in sub-Antarctica. And whilst I was there, I fell in love with a marine biologist, Steffi, who was studying them. And yeah, we bonded over our love of the wildlife there, didn't we?
And photography as well.
Yeah.
I think when I first met Oli, I told him I like photography, and I think he just was like, yeah, sure, everyone likes photography here because there are penguins, right? And then I went out doing photography with him, and when he saw the lens that I had, because they had this huge lens for taking pictures down there, he believed me at that point, and I think I impressed him with my equipment there. But he impressed me. One of our first dates down there, we managed to get a night off base. So we hiked out for, it's about a 4-hour hike through the snow, and you get to this bay, and there's a big glacier at the side and a river, and you just look out to the ocean and this tiny little hut. And we spent the night in the hut having dinner there. And Oli pulled out of his bag a box of handmade chocolates that he'd made himself. And I was like, okay, this boy knows what he's doing. So, so that was kind of how things started for us. And I was down there for, well, in total nearly 3 years. But I met Oli when I had about a year left of the time that I was down there. So when we met, we only had about 6 weeks together. And then Oli left, went back to the UK, and then we had another 10 months or so when I was there and he was here. And so we had to experience long distance straight away, pretty much. And we always say that WhatsApp was the thing that really got our relationship through that time, because the internet is so bad there, but we could just about send messages to each other and kind of built things from there.
And I think working in Antarctica, it's quite an intense environment to be working in. And if you do fall in love there, then you get very strong foundations in your relationship pretty quickly.
Yeah, because you don't go home, you're just together 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, straight away. So things can get kind of intense kind of quickly, but it worked out for us. That was 10 years ago. So still going good.
That's amazing. I mean, your love story truly just sounds like a Hallmark movie. Because then did you guys move into London together? And then what finally drew you or moved you guys to Skye of all the places that are mountainous and ocean or coastal, I should say?
When we met up, I was actually living in London at the time. And when Steph got back, she whisked me away from London straight away. I was in a bit of a midlife crisis at the time. I was working in a fashion studio in London as a studio assistant, which was an amazing experience. But Steph was very clear that she wasn't a city dweller and she needed to be in the countryside.
To be fair to me, I had been living on an island with 10 other people for a year and then moving into London with millions of people. It was a bit too much of a culture shock. So we kind of settled in a little village just outside Cambridge, which is where Oli's family are. And that was, mellow enough to kind of handle.
Cambridge is this amazing place in the UK for conservation. There's a lot of conservation organisations based there and government agencies like the British Antarctic Survey, who Steph was working for at the time. And I grew up there because my late father also worked for the British Antarctic Survey, and he actually did the same role as Steph on the sub-Antarctic island and studied these seabirds as well. So we had this bond between us and this love for these beautiful birds.
Yeah, so we were there for about 4 years, living in the south of England. I was working for a conservation organisation. Oli was still doing some chefing in Antarctica and other places, but we got to the point where Oli didn't really want to do the chefing anymore, and we were looking at other opportunities for him. And that love of photography was still there. We were doing a lot of it together in our spare time, doing landscape photography, wildlife photography, and basically we just figured out that was what Oli wanted to do. And so we brainstormed some ideas of what kind of jobs we could get doing this. And to be honest, wildlife photographer is not really something that you can do in central England. Doesn't really pay the bills. And so we looked at wedding photography and thought, we'll give it a try. Not really knowing what to expect. And we did our first few weddings, and actually we really loved it. You know, getting to be there for people's, you know, it's the biggest day of a lot of people's lives, and just seeing all that joy and fun and happiness. It was really nice to get to be a small part of that.
Yeah, I think for myself, you know, coming from quite tough kitchens, restaurants in the UK, you know, it's a very different environment and vibe when compared to being with a couple on their wedding day. It's one of the happiest days of their lives. But that said, at that point, we were photographing big weddings. And with that also comes an amount of stress because, you know, maybe there's 80 guests there that you need to organise, and that was pretty full on, wasn't it?
Yeah, but then we got engaged ourselves in Hawaii, and we just thought, when we thought about what we wanted to do for our own wedding, we just didn't really feel that a huge event with 150 guests was really for us, and we wanted to do something that felt more like us. And so we decided that we were going to go back to the same spot we got engaged pretty much a year later and just elope. And so it was just the two of us, and we hiked out for about an hour along the coastline to an albatross colony, because albatross are the theme of our relationship. And so we got to the albatross colony. It rained. We got absolutely soaked on the way there, which we weren't really expecting, going from the UK to Hawaii. But, you know, it is what it is. And we had this amazing ceremony with a huge rainbow over the top of us, with albatross wheeling around our heads as we were saying our vows to each other. And it was perfect. You know, it was just for us. And then we went back, we had dinner with our friends, and we just thought, this is amazing. Like, it was so fun and no stress. And we just loved every minute of it.
I think the no stress is the important thing. You know, we had seen these big stressful weddings I was just trying to allude to in the UK, and they were still amazing days for the couple. But the experience that we had that day, it felt liberating, didn't it? And we were just excited and happy, and the whole day was fun. And in that moment, I think we wanted that for our couples going forward. So I think that was really when, you know, the idea about moving to Scotland started to forge in our minds a bit.
Yeah. Because Scotland is really good for elopements, because you can get married anywhere here, whereas in England you can only get married in a church or a registered venue. So you can't just go out into the wilds and choose a spot and say your vows, whereas in Scotland you can do that, which really made us think that, you know, with our love of the mountains and the kind of wilder lifestyle alongside trying to do just elopements and moving away from the big weddings, it was perfect. And then when COVID came along and I got the opportunity to work from home and not be tied to the office, we thought we'd quickly make our escape and sell our house, quickly buy a new one in Scotland before we all got called back to the office. And it worked out.
Yeah, we haven't been back.
That's amazing.
That's such a cool story.
It's such a cool story. I want to write a movie about you guys' life.
I know, right? But I guess it was in your own elopement that this idea of what you guys do now was kind of born. I guess, what was the process of making that dream a reality, of taking photographs of couples, whether it be just, you know, for the fun of having a photo shoot or for an actual elopement? How did that come to be?
So we got married at the end of 2018, and so going into 2019 we were still photographing the bigger weddings, and at that point we really started thinking about how we could, you know, transition over to doing more elopement style weddings. And so we started off doing a few shoots with friends that kind of were interested in that kind of idea, trying to build up a bit of a portfolio, because, you know, in the photography world you can't, well, in any world really, you can't sell what you can't show to people. So that people aren't going to book you if you have nothing to show them, so they can kind of see and feel what that experience will be like. And then we hit 2020. Every single one of our big weddings was cancelled for the year. We all know why. And so in that year, we just thought, you know what, we don't want to come out of this and still be doing those big weddings. And so we spent all of that time in lockdown in our house when we weren't allowed outside, just making a new website, completely rebranding to be only elopements, which was a little scary at the time, you know, taking all of our big weddings off our website and saying we're not going to book those anymore, which at that point, that was what we were booking, was a little nerve-wracking, but we were really confident in our decision that elopements were what we wanted to do. And so throughout that year, when we could, we would go to to photograph couples that we knew. And also there are things called style shoots, which is basically when a photographer will arrange a real couple, but to model basically. And so we'll work with other vendors like florists, dressmakers to create content for everybody that then they can use for advertising to showcase to couples what kind of things would be possible. And one of those in 2020 was up on Skye, as well as other places. And we just really fell in love with the idea of doing it on Skye. And so we came out of the pandemic with more of a portfolio and kind of a fledgling elopement business, and we haven't really looked back.
Yeah, and you know, the first booking that we actually took up here in Skye, I remember the first elopement we did here, it was a baptism of fire. It was a very wet day, you know, one of the wettest elopements we've probably ever.
It rained for 4 days solid.
Yeah,
like, completely.
it was brutal. It was really tough, and you know, we learned a lot of lessons. But I think that probably would have put a lot of photographers off doing it. But we even with that going on, we just had the best time, and I think we knew in that moment that this was our calling. We were in our element. That's just us. It's our personality compared to trying to orchestrate, you know, 80 to 100 guests in a big ballroom. It's just, yeah, it's more, I think.
Speaking of Skye, what is it like living on Skye? I mean, this is, for people who don't know, Skye is a very remote island that everybody told us before we went to Scotland, we had to go to Skye. But what is it like living on this place that is so rugged, but yet probably one of the most beautiful places in the world?
When we moved here, I didn't really know what to expect in terms of what it was like living here. Like, we'd visited the island many times, we'd worked on the island quite a lot, and we knew how beautiful it was and kind of everything it had to offer in terms of landscape and experience like that. But the thing we didn't really know about was the community here and kind of how we would be welcomed as new people coming into the island. And I have to say, we've been really pleasantly surprised by how close the community is here. Because we live in a small village, there's only a handful of houses here, but we've made some of our best friends on the island just in the village, because I think Skye really attracts people who love this kind of lifestyle, people who love the outdoors, who love adventure, and everyone has time for each other, which is so nice. You know, just on New Year's Eve, a couple of days ago, we had, you know, one of our neighbours popped over for a whiskey for a couple of hours, and it's just so nice to be able to walk into your neighbour's house and sit down and have a cup of tea or a whiskey, and everyone's always so happy to see you. So I think that's a really nice thing about living here.
And Steph's right, you really can just walk into your neighbour's house because it is a very slow pace of life here. Nobody really locks their doors. If you go into town, you need to really, you know, if you've got an errand to run, you need to factor in an extra 20 minutes because there's a good chance you're going to bump into somebody you know and they're going to want to chat to you and catch up, which is lovely. But yeah, it's definitely a slower pace of life, but it feels quite romantic.
It does.
I think as well, you know, we've only been here for 3.5 years. You know, sometimes we have to remind ourselves now when we drive past an epic landscape how lucky we are because it's our backyard and it's so easy to take your backyard for granted. But it's beautiful here.
Yeah, it's an amazing place to live. Like, obviously you are a long way removed from the city and the conveniences of life, but what Skye offers definitely makes up for that. And although it is remote, like you said, Keetin, you know, we can still get Amazon delivery. So we can still get things we need.
Skye's living in the modern age.
Yeah, Skye's getting more modern all the time. And we particularly like this time of year in winter because it is a popular island. So throughout the summer, you know, there's a lot of people coming to the island to see all the beauty. But that does have a few downsides in that it can get very busy, so the roads can be pretty slow, and you know, sometimes you go to the supermarket and there's nothing left. Everything's been sold out. But in winter, it's definitely slowed down, and we've been driving around the island, and you feel like the place is all to yourself, and it's kind of magical at the moment.
I will say some of my favorite photographs of yours that I've seen are the ones of couples when there's just that nice dusting of snow everywhere. Skye looks so beautiful in the snow. I really feel like I need to someday see that because it's
we'll just have to make a trip and set up a photo shoot with them and hope for snow. Just stay there, just like camp out until it snows. We're like, guys, it's snowing today. Let's go.
We have snow today, so if you guys want
I know.
We'll be there. We're on a plane now.
Yeah. Obviously, we picked Maid of Honor this week, the movie we reviewed, and I know you guys watched it. We picked it particularly because a good chunk of it takes place in Skye, less than I anticipated, actually, because I kept being like, when are we going to leave New York and get to Skye? Come on. But from what you guys watched and having lived there, did Maid of Honor portray Skye in an accurate way? What was kind of your opinion of how Scotland was portrayed in that film?
Well, I was just going to say there was definitely the romanticism. You know, we've just talked about how this feels like a romantic place to live. And in the film, it was definitely that getaway from urban life in America, wasn't it? And
I have to say, though, most of us don't live in castles, as portrayed in the movie with Kevin McKidd's lovely castle, which is just off Skye, Island Onan Castle. And it's a beautiful place. We go there for weddings sometimes. But I think it's a bit of a stereotypical view of Scotland, you know, with the Highland Games and that kind of thing. However, we do those things.
Yeah, like stuff does go on.
It does still happen here. So every summer in Portree, there's a hill at the top of the town, and we have the Highland Games, and we do the things that, you know, you did see in the film. So a lot of the traditions in there do actually still happen. You just need to know where to look and when to come to actually be able to experience those more traditional elements, because Scottish people are really proud of their history and their traditions. And so I think more than other places, you'll see that if you come here.
December is the most popular month of the year to get engaged because of the holidays primarily. Do you have any advice for newly engaged couples who are just starting on that journey of figuring out what they want to do for when they get married?
Yeah, we do. So I think the most important thing that we would say for newly engaged couples is to take your time and think about what you really want as a couple, because it's so easy to get swept up with what everybody else around you thinks you should do. As soon as you say you're engaged, everyone wants to know, when's the wedding? Where is it going to be? How about this place or this? And people, without meaning to, can quickly kind of put their ideas onto you, where that isn't necessarily what you want to do. So just take the time to chat with your partner and really think, for the two of you, what is your ideal day? You know, it might be the big wedding with the huge party and everyone there and having an amazing time like that. Or it might be that actually that's not for you and you'd rather have something more focused on the two of you and maybe think about an elopement. But it needs to be the right decision for you. Like, I think in the past, weddings have been for everyone else more than the couple. And we saw that with our big weddings. You know, people would only get a few minutes together, which was usually when we were photographing them after the reception, and the rest of the time you're just with everybody else, which is great for some people but not for others. So just really think what's important before you dive too fast into making decisions and committing.
Let's assume that there are some couples listening to this who might be interested in eloping in Skye, or at least are a little curious about it. What would you say to them?
Well, I guess the first thing for them to do is really just to look at some more information about what it is, eloping to Skye. And so if they wanted to look at some information that we put together, we actually have a guide to eloping in Skye on our website and in Scotland as well. So I would say take a look at that. Hopefully you can drop a link to that in your show notes maybe, so people can have a look at that. And then if they want more information, then honestly just reach out to us. Like, we're always really happy to speak to couples, even if they're at the very beginning stages and they're not 100% sure that they do want to elope, but they want someone to chat about ideas and then figure out for themselves if it is going to be what they want to do. So
yeah, absolutely. We don't want to pressure people into doing it if it's not the right thing for them. And, you know, for some people that big wedding is actually the right option. But yeah, it's great to connect with couples that want that sort of sense of adventure.
I recommend doing both and booking them for an engagement shoot and going and doing an adventure engagement shoot and then also having the big wedding.
That's true. That worked out great for us.
It worked out great for us. I cannot recommend, if you are listening and you are engaged, go to Skye, book Oli and Steph. They are incredible to work with, and you will never regret the photos or the time that you spend with them as your adventure guides and photographers. Truly,
I would 100%
truly.
agree with that. When a couple reaches out to you, can you just give a little bit of a rundown of like what your process is like working with them?
So what we normally do is when a couple reaches out, we then book in a Zoom call and we have a chat on the call with a couple just to try and understand more about what their vision is for their day and if we can provide that for them. And then we'll give them some ideas to kind of help them with the planning side, and then let them know how the process works. And then once they book in with us and get their date in the diary, then we will work with them really closely to make sure that the locations we pick are really suitable for them. Often, people either want mountains or they want a loch or the forest or the ocean. And so we figure out a timeline for the day that's going to fit them, because we don't want our elopements to feel like cookie cutter weddings where every single one is the same. People elope because they want to do something different and unique. So we want all of our couples to have a unique experience. So we'll go through that and figure out a plan. And then we actually, to make it easier for couples, because when we eloped, we had no clue what we were doing. It was really hard to plan an elopement in Hawaii. And so we just take away all of that stress from couples by booking them the celebrant to do the marriage for them. We'll book them flowers, hair and makeup, bagpiper if they want to go with the whole Scottish vibe, cake, picnic, kind of anything that they might want for the day. We can just arrange that for them, because it's so much easier for us to do that, because we work with all the vendors all the time. We know who's good, we know who's available. And so our couples can just choose their location, book their accommodation and their flights, and pretty much show up, and we just take care of everything else for them.
Yeah, and obviously Steph's talking about our eloping couples, but we work with a lot of couples like we did with you guys, couples that just want beautiful photographs on their trip to Skye. Perhaps you're celebrating an anniversary or a special date, and I think it's so important to do that. You guys you really have that enshrined in your culture to get nice photographs of yourselves, which is great, because here in the UK, really people only book photographers for christenings, weddings, that's about it really, graduations,
babies.
Yeah. And we've taken a leaf out of your book. So just last year we had 2 photo shoots done ourselves in Scotland, and we treasure those pictures already so much, and it's so important to get those memories and to get prints and albums.
Yeah, and it's such a cozy thing to do as well. Like this Christmas, we spent Christmas here by ourselves, because we've just been for a 3-week trip to Africa, which was amazing, but it wasn't very calming and cozy. It was
quite frenetic,
but amazing. So this Christmas, it was just been the 2 of us and the dogs at home. And one of the tasks that I really wanted to do was to go through all those photographs from our latest shoot, and then design an album and pick the cover and figure it all out. And so that's one of the things that we've been doing that's kind of given us some cozy feelings this Christmas.
I love that. Well, speaking of that, because I follow you guys obviously on social media, because we're so jealous of your lifestyle, but tell me about this amazing trip you guys took. You guys got to see some gorillas in the wild and do some photography of them. Please tell us and share how this came to be and what the trip was like.
Yeah, it was awesome. So with the gorillas, we were sitting 3 feet away from them. It was crazy. There was a silverback, so the big male, who's 400 kilograms, like a huge animal, and he was just sitting there, just staring into our eyes, and then he just lay down, resting his head on his hands, just looking at us, and it was just insane that you can do that.
But we were thinking about bucket list things earlier in the year, things we want to do in our lives, and we're both big wildlife nerds, and getting to spend time with mountain gorillas was there. But we took my mum as well, so we took my 72-year-old mum hiking up into the mountains in Uganda, and I was able to have this experience with my mum, which was so special.
But Uganda was amazing. We spent 3 weeks traveling. It was mainly wildlife focused, so we were doing game drives for safari, seeing elephants and giraffes and antelope, hippos, all of that kind of stuff, and then doing some hardcore bird watching as well, because we are bird nerds. Yeah, so we now have thousands of pictures of gorillas to go through, and video too, because we were also doing video. So we'll get around to that at some point.
Obviously, you guys have talked a little bit about how you got into kind of your business and photography and all of that, but in terms of conservation, if people are interested in getting into conservation, and I feel like I want to know this answer too, because I'm a huge animal nerd and wildlife nerd, what would be your advice for people who want to kind of start exploring that and helping kind of the wildlife in the way that you guys have dedicated a good portion of your life to?
So I think there's a way for everyone to be involved in conservation, whether that's an actual career in conservation. And if you want a career in conservation, then you kind of, you have to go to school and do your degrees and kind of gain experience in that way. But if you're just looking to be part of the conservation movement, then the thing we would really recommend doing, and it's kind of what we're doing now we don't do conservation as a full-time job. There's so many things happening within every community to do with conservation. So for example, here on Skye, Oli and I joined a whale, dolphin and seal rescue charity. And so if there's ever any seal pups which are stranded, or if dolphins get stranded, or whales, or there are any issues, then our team get called out and we do our best to help those animals. And sometimes we have happy endings and we manage to get dolphins back into the water and safely out to sea, and other times less happy endings. But it's really nice to know that you're part of a team who really cares about the local wildlife and environment, and we're trying to do something to help them. And so even if you don't live by the sea, there'll be conservation organizations helping with things like, bird surveys, or just cleaning up areas, like removing litter from wildlife places. There's just so many different options. So I'd say think about what you're interested in.
Yeah.
Is it a particular type of animal, or a type of environment, or a type of role? It depends what skills you have. You don't have to physically be on the ground doing things. Conservation organizations always need support in admin, in media, and all these different sides of things.
I used to cook. I used to be a chef,
conservation.
and then I got my ticket, on these big Antarctic conservation projects. That the first week of the project where I met Steph, I went from being in the kitchen to suddenly being underneath a helicopter and pouring bait into this hopper underneath a helicopter. And
so there's so many opportunities. You just need to go out there and offer your time and services, and don't really expect anything in return. But if you genuinely want to help, then somebody out there will have a role for you that you can take on.
So I know we just recently got into the new year. We're just about done here, but we do this thing on the show called the Hot Cocoa, where we share kind of the warm and fuzzy thing that got us for the week. But what is your hot cocoa for last year?
So our hot cocoa for last year is hygge. And I don't know if you guys have heard of hygge or not. It's a Danish concept. It's spelled Hygge. And it's a concept which is all about coziness, basically. It's about how you turn a house into a home and make it a place of comfort and connection. And about a year ago, it was last January, I went to Norway with some friends on an ice climbing trip, but we rented the coziest cabin that you've ever seen. It was so cute and cozy and warm. There were candles everywhere. We had 2 open fires in there. And we just had the nicest, most relaxing week in that little cabin. And so when I came home, I think Oli had already kind of been getting into hygge by himself.
There was a book randomly on my Kindle. I don't even remember downloading it. It was called The Little Book of Hygge by it's by a guy called, I'm going to butcher his name, I'm afraid, guys. I think he's Danish. Meik. Wiking?
Meik Wiking.
Meik Wiking.
Mike Wiking.
But maybe you can put that in the show notes as well, because it's a brilliant book. And Steph's talked about that home, bringing hygge into the home, but you can also experience hygge, apparently. It's the feeling you get sat around a campfire with friends, having a whiskey, or I don't know.
Yeah, and it's all about connection. So, we love board games. So those nights when you have friends around, you play board games, eat good food, have nice drinks.
Yeah.
Completely disconnect from the online world and just really spend quality time together. And so we've been really focusing on trying to have a more hygge life from our home itself. So we've got many candles now that we used to have. Cozy blankets and the fire is roaring for 6 months of the year because it's so cold here anyway. So that's kind of...
And I definitely felt it. I actually felt hygge watching the film that you guys recommended to us, for this podcast. That I think, the genre of films is a sense of hygge, isn't it? Watching it. I know Steph definitely felt it because Steph was swooning over the 2 main actors, because Steph's a massive Grey's Anatomy fan, and you've got McDreamy in there and
Owen Hunt.
Owen Hunt.
But hygge, definitely check it out, guys, if you haven't heard of the concept, because I think it is exactly what you guys are talking about. It's that it is channeling Hallmark in your entire life.
Anything else that you guys want to plug or share?
Anything coming up this year? How can we follow you? How can they book with you? All that fun stuff.
So this year we're mainly going to be here in Scotland. Last year was a big travel year for us, but this year I think we're going to go to Italy in the summer for a couple of weeks of hiking with friends. But other than that, we're going to mainly be home in Scotland. One of our ideas is to try to go to some of the other Scottish islands, because we have literally hundreds of islands around Scotland, and so we're trying to work our way around them all and see the differences. And we'd also love to do more elopements in different islands. Every year we try and do a couple away from Skye on different small places, and so we're looking for couples who might want to choose an island elopement. So if that's you, reach out to us.
The easiest way is probably on Instagram. We're on social media. That's our main platform, isn't it?
Yeah. So on Instagram, we're Oli and Steph, which is OLI and STEPH, and our website, oliandsteph.com. So you can see what we're up to on Instagram. We're trying TikTok, but not so much at the moment. But maybe that can be our New Year's resolution, to get better at TikTok.
Or if you're not on social media, just reach out on our website. And we're really receptive to anyone.
Yeah, they get back to you very quickly. I had this idea to do this photo shoot when we were already traveling, and I was like, Dylan, we have to do this. We're only in Skye. And he's like, I don't really know. I don't really want to spend a day doing photography, doing photos. And I was like, no, we're doing it. We're doing it. And I reached out to you guys, and you were so quick to get back to us, and also so accommodating and so flexible when it rained the day we initially planned it. So if we weren't married.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad you went for it, Dylan, and you went through it. It was so.
I mean, that was one of my first lessons of listen to your wife. She knows what she's talking about.
Life knows best. Yeah. Well, if you guys come back to Skye, then you can always do a Varanol, and we can take you to some more epic places on Skye.
You don't even have to have a reason. You can just do a couple sessions as well, for sure.
So you don't need an excuse. You can celebrate your love as often as you like.
I love that.
That's the perfect thing to end on.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. And I guess we'll leave links to your website, your Instagram, and all of that in the show notes if anyone wants to learn more about Oli and Steph.
Yes, you guys would not regret it. Please, if you want to get eloped, elope in Skye, elope with Oli and Steph. You will have the most amazing time. I cannot recommend them enough.
That was our interview with the amazing Oli and Steph. We will be sure to include all of their details in the show notes if you want to learn more about them. But that's our episode. Thank you so much for listening. Keetin, what should people do?
You guys should subscribe, comment on the podcast, as well as throughout all of our social media platforms at Channeling Hallmark on Instagram, YouTube, and Blue Sky, as well as follow us on Letterboxd and let us know after you watch Maid of Honor what your rating might be. But until then, thank you so much for joining us in 2025 to start off the year channeling Hallmark. We look forward to doing this with you all year. Thanks so much. I'm Keetin Markey.
And I'm Dylan Cashbaugh.
Bye-bye.
Channeling Hallmark is an independently produced podcast and is neither sponsored nor sanctioned by Hallmark or any other entity. Thank you for listening.